I watched Maya slip the acceptance letter into her bag with trembling hands, her eyes bright with triumph she thought I couldn't see. In my previous life, I would have been devastated. This time, I smiled and congratulated her because I knew exactly what that prestigious scholarship to Whitmore University would cost her. The poison was already working its way through my system the first time around. Maya had slipped it into my coffee the morning of the national scholarship exam. Nothing lethal, just enough to make my hands shake and my vision blur during the test that would determine our futures. I'd scored in the 40th percentile. She'd scored in the 99th. The full-ride scholarship to Whitmore University, the most prestigious institution in the country, went to her. I'd ended up at community college, working 3 jobs to afford textbooks. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 6 months later when Maya disappeared. Not gradually, not with warning signs. She simply vanished. The university claimed she'd dropped out, returned home. But Maya never came home. Her parents filed missing persons reports that went nowhere. Police investigations hit dead ends. It was as if Whitmore University had swallowed her whole. Then I started digging. Late nights at the library, internet deep dives, connecting dots no one else seemed to see. Whitmore University wasn't just exclusive, it was wrong. Students who went there either came from legacy families already connected to the institution, or they were scholarship recipients chosen for specific traits. High academic performance, yes, but also isolated, easily manipulated, desperate to prove themselves. Students without strong family connections or support systems. Students like Maya had been. By the time I pieced together the truth, it was too late for her. Whitmore wasn't a university at all. It was a recruitment center for a cult called the Ascension Project, a group that had been operating for over 30 years, building wealth and influence through a network of enlightened individuals who funneled money, resources, and eventually their entire identities into the organization. The scholarship winners were the fresh blood, chosen to be indoctrinated, broken down, and rebuilt as devoted followers. I'd tried to expose them. I'd gone to the police, the media, anyone who would listen. But Whitmore had lawyers, money, and connections in every corner of power. My accusations made me look like a conspiracy theorist grieving a lost friend. No one believed me. And then the Ascension Project came for me. They didn't like that I was asking questions. One night, walking home from my shift at the diner, a black car had jumped the curb. I remembered the impact, the cold pavement, the taste of blood. I remembered dying alone on that street. My last thought, a desperate wish that I could go back and save Maya. Then I woke up in my childhood bedroom, 18 years old again, 3 times, months before the scholarship exam. Rebirth. Impossible but undeniable. I had all my memories, all my knowledge, and this time, a chance to change everything. The first week back, I'd cataloged everything I remembered. Every detail about Whitmore, every red flag, every piece of evidence I'd gathered before. But I'd also realized something crucial. Going to the authorities hadn't worked the first time. Whitmore was too powerful, too protected. If I tried to expose them the same way, I'd just end up dead again, and Maya would still be taken. No, this time I needed a different approach. I needed to let Maya take the scholarship. It seemed insane at first. Every protective instinct screamed at me to stop her, to sabotage her instead, to save my best friend from the nightmare that awaited. But I'd learned something in my previous life that I couldn't ignore. Whitmore chose its victims carefully. If Maya didn't go, they'd just select someone else. And I'd have no way to stop them, no insider information, no advantage. But if Maya went, if I let everything proceed as it had before, I could use my foreknowledge to stay one step ahead. I could infiltrate Whitmore not as a student, but as someone investigating from the outside. I could document everything, gather evidence that would actually stick, and take down the entire organization from within. It meant sacrificing myself again. It meant working dead-end jobs and pretending to struggle while Maya celebrated her success. It meant watching her walk into danger with a smile on my face. But it also meant I could save her, and dozens, maybe hundreds of others. The hard part was the pretending. Maya and I had been inseparable since middle school. We'd shared everything, secrets, dreams, late-night conversations about the future. I'd trusted her completely. In my first life, discovering that she'd poisoned me had been almost worse than the physical effects. The betrayal had cut deeper than any knife. This time, I saw it coming. 3 months before the exam, I noticed the changes. The way Maya's eyes lingered on the scholarship brochures, the way she asked careful questions about my study schedule, my preparation methods, the desperation beneath her friendly smiles. I'd forgotten, in my grief and anger, what had driven her to do it. Maya's family was drowning in debt. Her father's business had collapsed, creditors were circling, and their house was weeks from foreclosure. The scholarship wasn't just an opportunity for Maya, it was a lifeline. It was everything, and I'd had it too easy. Comfortable middle-class family, no financial pressure, good grades that came naturally. From Maya's perspective, I'd never struggled for anything. The scholarship would be nice for me, but for her, it was survival. That didn't excuse poisoning me. Nothing excused that. But understanding her desperation made the pretending easier. I could smile and encourage her studying while knowing what she'd eventually do, because I understood the fear driving her. I could be patient. The day before the exam, Maya invited me to her house to study together. I accepted, even though I knew what was coming. I watched her make coffee in her kitchen, saw her hand tremble as she reached for something in her pocket. The powder dissolved into my mug without a trace. "You're going to do amazing tomorrow," she said, handing me the cup. "So are you," I replied and took a careful sip. The drug was tasteless. In my previous life, I hadn't noticed anything wrong until halfway through the exam. This time, I knew exactly what to expect. Muscle weakness, blurred vision, difficulty concentrating. Symptoms that would peak during the test and fade within hours, leaving no trace. I drank half the coffee, enough to make it look natural, but not enough to completely disable me. Then I excused myself to the bathroom and forced myself to vomit as quietly as possible. When I returned, I finished the cup, letting Maya see me drain it. That night, I took activated charcoal and drank liters of water. By morning, enough of the drug had cleared my system that I could function, though I still felt off. Enough to seem affected, but not enough to fail completely. During the exam, I carefully calibrated my performance. Too low and I'd seem incompetent. I still needed some opportunities. Too high, and Maya might not get the scholarship. I aimed for the 60th percentile. Good, but not exceptional. Occasionally, I let my hands shake as I bubbled in answers. I squinted at questions, making a show of difficulty. Maya, beside me, worked with furious concentration. I could feel her anxiety radiating outward, her desperate need to succeed. When the proctor called time, she looked exhausted but grimly satisfied. 2 weeks later, the results came. Maya, 99th percentile. Me, 58th percentile. She got the scholarship. Full ride to Whitmore University, including room and board, a stipend for expenses, everything. The acceptance letter came with an embossed invitation to an orientation weekend, all expenses paid. I watched her open it, watched joy and relief flood her features. She hugged her parents, who cried with happiness. The foreclosure notices would stop. The creditors would back off. She was saved. "I'm so sorry you didn't get it," she told me later, her eyes almost convincing in their sympathy. "You deserved it just as much." "You earned it," I said, and meant it in ways she didn't understand. "You're going to do incredible things there." She smiled, believing me. I spent the summer working. Not just one job, but 3, same as my previous life. I needed money, but more importantly, I needed to establish a pattern. Community college student struggling to make ends meet. No one would question why I worked long hours, why I seemed to disappear on my days off. Because my days off were spent preparing. I enrolled in online courses about investigative journalism, digital security, evidence documentation. I bought a high-quality camera with a telephoto lens, learned to use audio recording equipment, studied the legal requirements for evidence admissibility. I created anonymous email accounts and learned to use VPNs and encrypted messaging. And I researched Whitmore. Everything I'd discovered before, I found again. But this time I was methodical. I documented sources, screenshot articles, saved everything to encrypted cloud storage with multiple backups. I traced the cult's history back decades, mapped their organizational structure, identified key players. The Ascension Project had been founded in the 1960s by a charismatic philosophy professor named Dr. Elias Thorne. He'd preached a doctrine of human transcendence through enlightenment, wealth accumulation, and absolute loyalty to the collective consciousness of the group. Standard cult stuff, dressed up in pseudo-intellectual language. But Thorne had been smart. Instead of isolating his followers on a compound, he'd embedded them in society. Whitmore University was the crown jewel, an accredited institution that could attract legitimate students while serving as a filtering system for potential recruits. The campus was isolated, 3 hours from the nearest city, surrounded by forest. Perfect for control, the scholarship students were the targets. Legacy students, whose families were already part of the Ascension Project, helped with the recruitment and indoctrination. By the time anyone realized what was happening, they were too deep to escape. Maya had no idea what she was walking into. I watched her prepare for college with growing dread. She bought bedding and school supplies, excited about her new life. Her parents were so proud. I attended her going-away party and smiled through the whole thing, knowing I might never see her this happy again. The night before she left, she came to my apartment, the tiny studio I could barely afford with my 3 jobs. She sat on my secondhand couch and looked at me with something like guilt. "I wish you were coming with me," she said. Liar, I thought. You poisoned me to prevent exactly that. "Community college is fine," I said aloud. "I'll transfer eventually. You focus on making the most of this opportunity." She hugged me goodbye, and I let her, memorizing the moment. The last time Maya would be truly herself. She left for Whitmore on a Monday in late August. I gave her 2 weeks to settle in before I made my move. Whitmore's campus wasn't completely closed to outsiders. That would raise too many red flags. They allowed some visitors, held occasional public events, maintained a veneer of normalcy. But you couldn't just walk onto campus without reason. My reason was simple. I was a prospective student considering transfer. I'd called ahead, scheduled a campus tour, played the role of eager community college student looking to upgrade. The campus was beautiful, I had to admit, historic. Buildings with ivy-covered walls, manicured lawns, towering oak trees. It looked like every prestigious university ever filmed. Safe, traditional, trustworthy. The tour guide was a perky junior named Bethany, a legacy student whose family had attended Whitmore for generations. She smiled constantly and spoke in carefully rehearsed phrases about academic excellence and tight-knit community. I played my part, asked about transfer requirements, admissions statistics, housing options. But I was really studying the campus layout, noting security cameras, identifying buildings, looking for vulnerabilities. The scholarship dorms were separate from the rest of campus, Bethany explained. "It's just easier to have all the scholarship students together," she said. "They have such similar experiences, you know? It helps them bond." Translation: easier to isolate and manipulate. I asked to see the dorms, but Bethany demurred. "Those buildings are being renovated right now. We can show you the standard residence halls instead." I already knew the scholarship dorms weren't being renovated. They were where the real work of the Ascension Project happened, and they didn't want outsiders seeing inside. But I'd gotten what I came for, a mental map of the campus, face recognition of key staff members, and photographs for my parents that captured building layouts and security placement. I didn't see Maya during that visit, though I looked for her. She was probably already in the indoctrination phase. Love bombing from seemingly friendly students, special seminars about reaching your potential, gradual isolation from outside contacts. The Ascension Project's method was insidious. They didn't break you down all at once. They made you feel special first, chosen, part of an elite group that understood things others didn't. They offered friendship, academic support, mentorship. They gave you exactly what you needed most, then slowly made that conditional on your compliance. For Maya, desperate to prove herself worthy of the scholarship, desperate to escape her family's financial disaster, the attention would be intoxicating. I gave it another month before I reached out to her directly. Her response to my text messages had grown more sporadic by then. When she did reply, her messages were different, shorter, more distant. She talked about how transformative her classes were, how she'd never realized how much potential she had. Classic cult language. I played the concerned friend, but not too concerned. Asked casual questions about her classes, her roommate, whether she'd joined any clubs. She mentioned something called the Ascension Society, a student organization focused on personal development and enlightened thinking. There it was, the recruitment arm operating openly under everyone's noses. I asked if I could visit her on campus. She hesitated before agreeing, and I knew she'd check with someone first. Permission granted or denied 3 days. Later, she confirmed I could come for a weekend visit. They wanted to evaluate me, see if I might be suitable for recruitment too. I arrived on a Friday evening in October. The leaves were changing, the campus gilded in autumn colors. Maya met me outside her dorm, one of the isolated scholarship buildings, and she looked different. Thinner, with shadows under her eyes, but also oddly serene. Like she'd found religion. In a sense, she had. "It's so good to see you." She hugged me, but it felt performative, like she was following a script. Her room was tiny, institutional, with a roommate named Jessica who smiled too much and watched me too carefully. They'd decorated with Ascension Project materials. I recognized the symbols from my research, the stylized sun representing enlightenment, quotes from Dr. Thorne's writings on the walls. We made small talk, but I could feel them probing, asking questions as designed to assess my vulnerability. Was I happy at community college? No. Did I feel like I was reaching my potential? Definitely not. Did I ever feel like society was holding me back from something greater? All the time. All lies, but they were what Maya and Jessica wanted to hear. "You should come to one of our Ascension Society meetings," Maya suggested, too casually. "I think you'd really connect with what we're learning." "Maybe," I said, noncommittal. That night, after Jessica went to sleep, Maya and I stayed up talking in whispers. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of my real friend underneath the indoctrination. "I know this seems weird," she admitted quietly. "But this place, these people, they've helped me see things clearly. I'm not just Maya who barely escaped poverty anymore. I'm becoming something more." My heart broke. "You were always something more." She smiled sadly. "You're a good friend. I wish you understood." "I wish you knew I poisoned you," I thought she might say. But she didn't. The guilt was still there, buried under layers of rationalization and cult programming. I spent that weekend documenting everything I could without raising suspicion. Photos of the dorm building, voice recordings of conversations, screenshots of the Ascension Society's private online forum that Jessica carelessly left open on her laptop. Most importantly, I planted a keylogger on Maya's computer, a tiny USB device disguised as a charging cable. She'd never notice it, and it would capture every keystroke, every password, every private message. It felt like a violation, spying on my best friend. But Maya wasn't really my friend anymore. The Ascension Project was taking her piece by piece, and I needed intelligence to fight back. When I left Sunday evening, Maya hugged me goodbye and invited me to come back anytime. "We could always use more enlightened people," she said. And the way she said enlightened made my skin crawl. I drove away from Whitmore with a car full of evidence and a plan forming in my mind. The keylogger data was a goldmine. Maya's login credentials gave me access to the Ascension Society's internal systems, forums, shared documents, private messaging. I saw the full scope of their operation laid out in digital detail. The scholarship students were divided into growth pods, small groups led by senior members who guided their enlightenment journey. Each student was assigned a mentor, usually a legacy student or recent convert, who monitored their progress and reported back to leadership. The curriculum was insidious. It started with self-improvement rhetoric, positive thinking, goal setting, confidence building, then gradually introduced Ascension Project doctrine, the idea that most people were asleep while the enlightened few could perceive greater truths, that wealth and success were signs of enlightenment, that loyalty to the collective was paramount. They identified each student's vulnerabilities and exploited them systematically. Maya's file noted her poverty trauma and achievement anxiety. Her mentor was instructed to reinforce the message that only through the Ascension Project could she ensure financial security and prove her worth. It made me sick to read, but it also gave me what I needed: names, organizational structure, evidence of manipulation. I documented everything, backed it up, and kept digging. The deeper I went, the worse it got. The Ascension Project wasn't just indoctrinating students, they were extracting value. Once fully converted, members were expected to contribute financially, to recruit others, to donate their time and skills to advancing the organization's goals. Some students signed over their scholarship stipends, others took out private loans to donate, and those who tried to leave faced consequences. Threats, harassment, blackmail. The organization kept detailed files on every member's secrets, vulnerabilities, embarrassing moments. Insurance against defection. I found records of students who'd disappeared like Maya had in my previous life. Not missing persons cases. The Ascension Project was too smart for that. They simply broke these students down completely, made them so dependent on the organization that they vanished into it willingly. New identities, new lives, completely devoted to the cult. Maya was 3 months into her indoctrination. In my previous life, she'd been gone by 6 months. I was running out of time. The problem was evidence versus action. I had documentation now, better than before, but would it be enough? Whitmore's lawyers had crushed me last time. I needed something bigger, something undeniable. I needed someone with power to listen. That's when I remembered something from my research. A journalist who'd tried to investigate Whitmore years ago, Elizabeth Chen, who'd written a single article about the university's unusual student retention practices before her editor killed the story. She'd moved to a smaller publication afterward, but from her social media, she still seemed interested in investigative work. I reached out through an anonymous encrypted email offering information about Whitmore. Vague enough to avoid seeming crazy, specific enough to pique interest. She responded within hours. We met at a diner 3 hours from campus, neutral territory. Elizabeth was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and skeptical in the way good journalists are. She listened to my story with increasing attention, asking pointed questions, checking my evidence on her laptop. "This is insane," she said finally. "But it tracks with what I found before. How did you get all this?" I couldn't tell her about the rebirth, about foreknowledge, about having lived this before. So I lied, said Maya was my best friend, that I'd noticed concerning changes, that I'd gotten suspicious and started investigating. "I tried going to police," I said, which was true. "But Whitmore has connections. No one would listen. I need someone who can make this story big enough that they can't bury it." Elizabeth studied me. "You understand this could take months? Maybe years? Cults don't go down easy, especially ones with this much money and institutional protection." "I don't have years. Maya doesn't have years." She sighed. "Then we need to move fast. And we need something that forces immediate action, something so damning that authorities have no choice but to intervene." "Like what?" "Like evidence of a crime in progress, financial fraud maybe, or coercion. Something with a paper trail that prosecutors can follow." I thought about the files I'd seen, the loan documents, the financial coercion. "I can get that, but I need to go back to campus." "Too dangerous." "Maya trusts me. She'd give me access if I asked the right way." Elizabeth shook her head. "And if they catch you snooping? These people already killed you once." She stopped, realized what she'd said. "I mean, they could, if they realize what you were doing." The irony made me smile. "They already did," I said cryptically. "That's why I'm so motivated." We spent 3 hours planning. Elizabeth would continue digging from the outside, using her media connections to prepare for a major expose. I would gather the internal evidence we needed, financial records, signed documents, anything that proved the Ascension Project was engaging in criminal activity. The timing was delicate. Too soon, and we wouldn't have enough evidence. Too late, and Maya would be too far gone to save. I decided on a 2-week timeline. By Thanksgiving, I needed to have everything. My next visit to Whitmore was easier to arrange. Maya invited me herself. The cult was still evaluating me as a potential recruit, and I played into it. Asked questions about the Ascension Society, expressed interest in their teachings, mentioned how lost I felt at community college. They took the bait eagerly. This visit was different. They didn't just let me observe, they included me. I attended in mass, Ascension Society meeting, a 2-hour session of motivational speaking mixed with cult doctrine. The leader, a charismatic senior named David, spoke about breaking through the barriers that society places on our potential. Around me, students nodded along, their eyes bright with belief. Maya sat in the front row, fully engaged. Afterward, David approached me personally. Maya's told me about you. She thinks you have incredible potential. Thank you, I said, playing humble. Have you thought about transferring to Whitmore? We could help make that happen. There are pathways for promising students. I knew what that meant. Special scholarships controlled by the Ascension Project, contingent on joining the organization. I'd love that, I lied. But I'm not sure I'm enlightened enough yet. David's smile widened. Enlightenment is a journey. We can help you with that. Over the next few days, they love-bombed me constantly. Friendly students sought me out, invited me to study sessions and social events. They made me feel special, chosen, important. If I hadn't known what it was, if I hadn't been actively resisting, the attention would have been seductive. But I was there for evidence, not enlightenment. I used their trust against them. When Maya was in class, I accessed her laptop. I already had her passwords from the keylogger. I copied files from the Ascension Society's shared drives, financial records showing coerced donations, loan documents with predatory terms, internal communications about managing students who wanted to leave. Jessica caught me once, walking in while I was at Maya's computer. My heart stopped, but I'd prepared for this. Just checking my email, I said casually. My phone died. She accepted it without question. Why would she suspect me? I was Maya's friend, a prospective recruit. I belonged. The most damning evidence I found was in encrypted folders on the organization's server. Personnel files on every member, including detailed psychological profiles, vulnerabilities, and leverage points. These weren't educational records, they were manipulation blueprints. Maya's file made me physically ill. They'd documented everything: her family's financial situation, her guilt over the scholarship, her desperate need to prove herself worthy. They even had notes about me. Childhood friend, potential vulnerability, could be leveraged for deeper commitment. They'd planned to use our friendship against her. Maybe already had. I copied everything to encrypted flash drives, hiding them in my car. By the time I left Sunday evening, I had enough evidence to bury Whitmore and the Ascension Project both. But I needed one more thing: testimony from someone on the inside, someone who could corroborate what the documents showed. I found him in an unexpected place, working the night shift at a gas station 20 miles from campus. His name was Marcus, and he'd been a scholarship student 3 years ago. Unlike most times, he'd escaped, or more accurately, been discarded. The Ascension Project had broken him down so completely that he was no longer useful. They'd expelled him on manufactured academic charges and cut him loose. He was still recovering. I'd found his name in the files, seen the notes about his failed integration. On a hunch, I'd tracked him down through social media. When I approached him at the gas station, he flinched like I'd hit him. "I'm not going back," he said immediately. "I don't want you to. I want to stop them." His eyes, hollow and haunted, fixed on me. "You can't stop them. They're everywhere. They have money, lawyers, politicians. I have evidence, documentation, proof of fraud and coercion. But I need testimony from someone who survived it. They'll destroy me if I talk. They already destroyed you. This is how you fight back." Marcus stared at me for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. "Okay, but not here and not alone. I want protection." I introduced him to Elizabeth. Together, we spent hours recording his testimony. He detailed the indoctrination process, the financial exploitation, the psychological manipulation. He had scars, cigarette burns on his arms from discipline when he questioned the doctrine. He had documents, loan paperwork with predatory interest rates, emails threatening him when he tried to leave. His story, combined with my evidence, built an ironclad case. Elizabeth worked her media connections, prepared to drop the story across multiple platforms simultaneously. too big for Whitmore to suppress. She contacted law enforcement contacts who specialized in cult cases, federal investigators who handled financial fraud. Everything was in place. The story broke on a Monday morning in late November, 1 week before Thanksgiving. Elizabeth's article hit every major news outlet simultaneously. Headlines screamed about elite university's dark secret, scholarship students exploited by cult, the Ascension Project's campus recruiting operation. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, internal communications, testimony from Marcus and 3 other survivors Elizabeth had found. Photographs of cult materials in dorm rooms, documentation of the psychological manipulation. And it all pointed to Whitmore University as ground zero. The response was immediate and explosive. Federal investigators raided the campus within hours. State education authorities launched emergency reviews. News crews descended on Whitmore like locusts. The university's board of directors held emergency meetings while protesters gathered at the gates. I watched it all unfold from my apartment, monitors displaying multiple news streams, constantly refreshing social media. It was surreal seeing the story I'd lived twice become public knowledge, but my focus was on Maya. The raid happened while students were in class. Federal agents, accompanied by state police and FBI, swept through the scholarship. Dorms, they interviewed students, confiscated documents, arrested key Ascension Project leaders. David, the charismatic senior who'd tried to recruit me, was let out in handcuffs. So were 3 professors, 2 administrators, and the director of student services. The arrests kept coming as investigators uncovered the full scope of the operation. Whitmore's president held a press conference denying knowledge of any cult activity. No one believed him. By evening, he'd resigned. The scholarship students were offered immediate transfers to other universities, full accommodations made. Counselors and cult deprogramming specialists arrived to help them process what had happened. But some students were too deep. I saw Maya on the news that evening. She was with a group of Ascension Project members protesting outside the administration building, holding signs about persecution and enlightenment. Her face was furious, convinced that the raid was an attack on truth. My heart sank. She was still in it, still believing. Elizabeth had warned me this might happen. Some people can't accept they've been manipulated, she'd said. It's too painful to admit they were fooled. They'll cling to the cult identity rather than face that truth. But I hadn't saved Maya just to lose her to denial. I drove to Whitmore the next day, through the chaos of media trucks and police vehicles. Campus was in lockdown, but they were allowing families in to collect their students. I claimed to be Maya's sister, close enough to the truth, and was directed to a crisis center they'd set up in the student union. I found her there, sitting with a group of true believers, all of them looking shell-shocked and defensive. Maya, she looked up, and her expression went through several stages: recognition, confusion, and then sudden understanding. You did this. You're the anonymous source. I didn't deny it. How could you? Her voice broke. You destroyed everything. You destroyed my future. I saved your future. You just can't see it yet. The Ascension Project gave me purpose, community, a path forward. They believed in me when no one else did. I believed in you. I always believed in you. That's why I couldn't let you disappear into this. Around us, other students were arguing with their families, crisis counselors trying to mediate. The scene was chaos, but I only saw Maya. You don't understand, she insisted. You've never understood. You have everything. Stable family, no money worries, opportunities just handed to you. I had to fight for this scholarship, had to prove I was worthy. By poisoning me? The words dropped like stones. Maya's face went white. The morning of the exam, I continued quietly. You put something in my coffee, made me sick, made sure I couldn't compete. You think I didn't figure it out? She opened her mouth, closed it. Tears streamed down her face. I didn't. I couldn't. You could. You did. And I understood why you were desperate. But Maya, that desperation, the Ascension Project didn't save you from it. They exploited it. They found your worst fear and used it to control you. No, yes, Look at the evidence, read the files. They had a psychological profile on you, detailed plans for how to manipulate you, notes about using your guilt and your poverty trauma against you. You weren't special to them. You were a target. I pulled out my phone, showed her screenshots of her own file, watched her read about herself through the Ascension Project's clinical, manipulative lens. When she looked up, something had broken in her expression. They said, they said I was chosen, that I had potential. You do have potential, but they wanted to own it, not help you develop it. Every dollar they encouraged you to donate, every hour they demanded you volunteer, every friend they made you cut off, that wasn't enlightenment. That was exploitation. Maya crumpled, sobbing. I sat beside her, let her cry, didn't say anything more. Sometimes the truth just needs space to settle. Around us, similar scenes were playing out, families reuniting with their children, cult members slowly confronting reality, crisis counselors facilitating difficult conversations. The deprogramming would take time, months, maybe years for some students. But at least they had a chance now. Eventually, Maya spoke again, her voice small. I'm sorry, for the exam, for everything. I was just so scared. I know. And now everything's ruined anyway. The scholarship's gone, I can't stay at Whitmore, my family's still in debt. The scholarship transferred. Elizabeth made sure of it. Every scholarship student affected by this is being placed at other universities with full funding. You're going to finish your degree, Maya, just somewhere that isn't a cult recruitment center. She looked at me, disbelieving. After what I did to you, why would you help me? Because you're my best friend. Even when you're at your worst, making terrible choices, you're still my best friend. And I couldn't let you disappear into that place. How did you even know? How did you figure all this out? I couldn't tell her the full truth. How could I explain that I'd watched her vanish in another life, that I'd died trying to expose Whitmore and been given a second chance? She'd think I was insane. So I told her a simpler truth. I noticed changes in you, got worried, started digging, and once I started finding things, I couldn't stop. You did all this just to save me? Not just you. There were dozens of scholarship students being exploited. But yes, you were my main motivation. She started crying again, but different tears this time. Relief, grief, gratitude, all mixed together. Over the next few hours, we talked through everything. I helped her contact her parents, helped her work with the crisis counselors to process what had happened. By evening, she'd agreed to enter a deprogramming program and accept the transfer scholarship to a state university closer to home. It wasn't a perfect resolution. Maya would need therapy, time to heal from the manipulation. Our friendship had fractures that might never fully repair, but she was alive, free, and aware of what had been done to her. That was more than I'd managed to save in my first life. The Ascension Project's downfall played out over the following months. Federal investigators uncovered 3 decades of fraud, coercion, and exploitation. The organization had assets in the hundreds of millions, all built on the backs of manipulated members. Dr. Elias Thorne, now in his 80s, was arrested at his compound in Montana. The trial became a media sensation. Evidence of his crimes, financial fraud, false imprisonment, conspiracy, filled courtrooms for weeks. He was ultimately sentenced to 30 years in prison. Whitmore University never recovered. With its administration gutted, its reputation destroyed, and massive lawsuits from victimized students, the institution collapsed within a year. The campus was sold, the buildings repurposed, the legacy erased. Elizabeth Chen's reporting won a Pulitzer Prize. Marcus, the survivor who'd testified, used his settlement money to start a nonprofit helping cult survivors. He became an advocate, speaking at conferences, helping other victims find their way back. And Maya? She transferred to State University in the spring semester. The scholarship covered everything, and she threw herself into her studies with renewed focus, this time for herself rather than to prove anything to anyone. She changed her major from business to psychology, determined to understand what had been done to her and help others avoid the same fate. Our friendship survived, but it was different. There was a distance now, a wariness that hadn't existed before. She knew I'd kept secrets from her, orchestrated events behind the scenes. She didn't know about the rebirth, about the first timeline, but she sensed there was more to the story than I'd told her. Sometimes I caught her looking at me with a mix of gratitude and confusion, trying to figure out how I'd managed to save her when everyone else had failed. I never told her the full truth. How could I? The rebirth was mine alone, a secret I'd carry forever. But in quiet moments, I wondered if she suspected something impossible had happened. The way she'd sometimes say, "It's like you knew exactly what would happen," or "You were always 3 steps ahead." I'd just smile and change the subject. As for me, I finished community college and transferred to state university myself the following year. Not to watch over Maya, she didn't need that anymore, but because I'd finally earned my own second chance. My grades from the first timeline had been good enough, and with the money I'd saved from my jobs, I could afford it. I studied journalism, inspired by Elizabeth's work. If I had this knowledge, this impossible gift of foresight, I wanted to use it to help people. There were other injustices in the world, other victims who needed someone willing to dig deep and fight back. The Ascension Project had been my first target, but I suspected it wouldn't be my last. Life at state was surprisingly normal. I made new friends, joined the student newspaper, dated occasionally. I tried to live the college experience I'd missed in my first life, when I'd been consumed by grief and investigation. But I couldn't entirely let go of my vigilance. I noticed things other people missed. The business fraternity that seemed more like a pyramid scheme. The professor who showed inappropriate interest in vulnerable students. The campus organization that isolated members from their families. Small red flags, early warnings. Nothing as large-scale as Whitmore, but concerning nonetheless. I documented what I found and passed tips to Elizabeth, who'd become something of a mentor. She'd check into things, determine if they warranted investigation. Most didn't, but a few did, and together we intervened before situations spiraled. It became my secret purpose. The girl with impossible foreknowledge, using her second life to protect others from the predators I could now recognize. Maya noticed my investigations, though I tried to be subtle. One night during our junior year, she came to my apartment and found me surrounded by research. Newspaper clippings, printed emails, handwritten timelines. "What are you working on?" she asked. I'd been tracking a campus advisor who showed a pattern of predatory behavior toward international students. Nothing definitive yet, but enough red flags to warrant attention. "Just a story for the paper," I said, which was technically true. She studied my workspace with an expression I couldn't read. "You do this a lot. Dig into things. Find problems no one else sees." "Someone has to." "It's more than that, though. With Whitmore, with other stuff I've noticed you involved in, it's like you're on a mission. Like you're trying to save everyone." "Not everyone. Just the people I can help." Maya sat down, her eyes serious. "After Whitmore, I did a lot of thinking about what happened, about how you knew, about the timing of everything. And I keep coming back to these questions that don't make sense." My heart rate increased. "Like what?" "Like how you knew to plant that keylogger on my computer before you had any proof of what was happening. Like how you knew exactly which files to copy, exactly which evidence would matter. Like you'd done this before." I kept my expression neutral. "I got lucky, made educated guesses." "No one's that lucky, no one's that prepared." She leaned forward. "I'm not asking you to tell me whatever secret you're keeping. I know there's something you're not saying, something impossible probably. But I want you to know that I'm grateful. Whatever you did, however you did it, you saved my life. And I trust you." The words settled between us, an acknowledgement of the mystery neither of us could fully address. "Thank you," I said quietly. "So whatever you're working on now, whoever you're trying to help, if you need backup, I'm here. I owe you that much." I smiled. "You don't owe me anything, but I appreciate the offer." She nodded and changed the subject, but something had shifted. Maya knew I was more than I appeared, and she'd chosen to trust me anyway. It was a different kind of friendship than we'd had before. Less naive, more knowing, but maybe stronger for it. The investigation into the predatory advisor took 3 months. I gathered testimony from affected students, documented patterns of behavior, built a case. When I finally published the story in the campus paper, it sparked an internal investigation that resulted in his termination and criminal charges. 5 international students were saved from exploitation. Not as dramatic as taking down a cult, but no less important to them. This became my pattern. Throughout college and into my career as an investigative journalist, I used my abilities, both my rebirth knowledge and the investigative skills I'd honed, to identify and stop predators. I never had another experience as intense as Whitmore. Nothing else that required me to sacrifice a friend to an organization I knew would hurt her, to watch her walk into danger while I prepared to pull her out. That was unique to the specific circumstances of my rebirth, the narrow window of time I'd been sent back to. But I'd learned something valuable from that experience. Sometimes saving people requires patience, strategy, and a willingness to let things seem to go wrong before you can make them right. I worked for regional papers, then national ones. I broke stories about financial fraud, institutional abuse, predatory organizations. I developed a reputation as someone who could see patterns others missed, who could predict how situations would develop. Some colleagues found it uncanny. "It's like you know what's going to happen before it does," one editor remarked after I successfully anticipated a cover-up attempt. I'd just smile mysteriously. Let them think I was exceptionally intuitive. It was easier than the truth. Elizabeth and I remained close. She'd been the first person to believe me about Whitmore, and though she never knew the full story, she understood I was fighting demons she couldn't see. We collaborated on several major investigations over the years, our partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "You're going to burn out if you keep this pace," she warned me when I was 25, working on my 3rd major expose in a year. "You can't save everyone." "I have to try." "Why? What drives this need in you?" I thought about the first timeline, about dying on that street, alone and failed, about Maya vanishing into the Ascension Project, about all the ways that life had gone wrong. "Let's just say I know what happens when good people don't act," I told her. "I've seen the consequences, and I can't let that happen again if I can prevent it." She studied me with that journalist's penetrating gaze. "There's a story there. One you're not telling. Maybe someday." But I knew I never would. The rebirth was my burden and my gift, unexplainable and impossible. I'd carry it alone. Maya graduated with honors and went on to a doctoral program in clinical psychology. Her dissertation focused on cult recovery and deprogramming. No surprise given her experience. She published papers, spoke at conferences, became an expert in her field. We stayed in touch, though our lives diverged. She settled into academia while I chased stories across the country, but every few months we'd meet for coffee and catch up. Those conversations were always tinged with the weight of what we'd been through together, the unspoken questions about how I'd known, how I'd saved her. On the 5-year anniversary of Whitmore's collapse, Maya called me late at night. "I was thinking about everything that happened," she said, "about how you orchestrated it all, and I realized something." "What's that?" "You let me take that scholarship. You knew something was wrong with Whitmore, you must have, to be ready to investigate the way you did. But you let me go anyway." My throat tightened. She'd finally pieced it together. "You used me as bait," she continued, not accusatory, just stating fact. "You couldn't stop Whitmore without inside information, so you let me walk into their trap, knowing you'd pull me out later." "Yes," I admitted. There was no point lying now. She was quiet for a long moment. "I should be angry about that. You risked my life, my sanity, to take them down." "I know, I'm sorry. But I'm not angry. Because if you'd tried to warn me, I wouldn't have believed you. I was too desperate for that scholarship. And if I hadn't gone, they would have taken someone else, someone without you watching their back." That's what I told myself, too. "It was the right call," she said firmly, but it was a terrible, calculated, manipulative call, but it was right. You saved me and dozens of others. I just wish you'd trusted me enough to tell me the plan." I couldn't. You had to react naturally for it to work. I know, doesn't mean I have to like it. She paused. But I understand it. And I forgive you if that matters. It matters. We talked for another hour, finally addressing all the complicated feelings from that time. The betrayal of the poisoning, the manipulation of the investigation, the secrets and half-truths. We cleared the air in ways we'd been unable to do before. By the end of the call, our friendship felt more solid than it had in years, built on truth now, however uncomfortable. You're still keeping secrets, she said before we hung up. Big ones, about how you knew what really happened, but that's okay. Everyone's entitled to their mysteries. Just know that whenever you're ready to tell me, I'll listen. Thank you. And if you ever need help with whatever crusade you're on next, call me. I'm serious. You saved my life. Let me return the favor. After we hung up, I sat in my apartment and thought about the two timelines of my life. In the first, I'd been reactive, discovering the truth about Whitmore too late, trying to expose them only after Maya had vanished. I'd died with nothing accomplished, justice unserved. In this second life, I'd been proactive. I'd used my foreknowledge as a weapon, planned carefully, gathered allies, and struck at the perfect moment. I'd saved Maya and countless others. But the victory had required sacrifices. I'd watched my best friend get manipulated for months. I'd planted surveillance on her, invaded her privacy, used her as an unwitting asset in my investigation. I'd made cold, calculated decisions that prioritized the larger mission over individual comfort. Was I a hero or a manipulator? A savior or someone who'd sacrificed a friend for the greater good? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe it didn't matter as long as the outcome was right. These were questions that would haunt me for the rest of this second life. Questions without clear answers. What I knew for certain was this. I'd been given an impossible gift, a second chance to right terrible wrongs. And I'd used it. Not perfectly, not without cost, but effectively. The Ascension Project was destroyed. Dr. Thorne would die in prison. Whitmore University was gone, and Maya was free, whole, building a life dedicated to helping others avoid what she'd survived. That had to count for something. The years continued to pass. I built a successful career, won awards for my investigative journalism, and quietly intervened in situations where I saw patterns emerging that reminded me of Whitmore. Most of my investigations were mundane compared to that first case. Financial fraud, political corruption, corporate malfeasance. But occasionally I'd encounter something darker. A multi-level marketing scheme that was really a cult. A wellness retreat that isolated and exploited vulnerable people. A spiritual leader whose healing practice was covering for abuse. Each time I thought of Maya, of watching her walk into danger, of the cold calculus required to save her. And I did what needed to be done, even when it meant making hard choices, even when it meant letting things get worse before they could get better. I never told anyone about the rebirth, not Maya, not Elizabeth, not any of the colleagues or sources who remarked on my uncanny ability to predict how stories would develop. It was too impossible, too bizarre. They'd think I was delusional or lying. So I carried the secret alone, a strange weight that was both burden and blessing. Sometimes I wondered why I'd been given this second chance. Was it random? Divine intervention? Some cosmic accident? I had no answers, only gratitude. That when I died that first time, wishing I could go back and save Maya, something had listened. By the time I turned 30, I'd built a reputation as one of the country's top investigative journalists. Editors sought me out for sensitive cases. Sources trusted me with dangerous information. Victims of exploitation knew I'd take their stories seriously. And throughout it all, I remained vigilant for the next Whitmore, the next Ascension Project. Because I knew from experience that predators were everywhere, wrapped in respectable institutions, hiding behind prestigious names and fancy credentials. I knew because I'd seen it twice. Once when I failed to stop them, and once when I succeeded. The lessons from both timelines guided me. From the first life, the importance of evidence, the need for powerful allies, the danger of underestimating institutional power. From the second, the value of patience, the effectiveness of strategic thinking, and the sometimes brutal calculus required to save people from themselves. Maya's career flourished too. By 30, she was a leading researcher in cult recovery, published in major journals, consulted on high-profile cases. We'd occasionally work together. She'd provide psychological expertise for my investigations. I'd point her toward victims who needed her help. Our partnership had come full circle. The girl who'd poisoned me and the girl who'd saved her, now working together to protect others from the predators we'd learned to recognize. It was poetic in a way, redemption and second chances woven together. One evening, after we'd collaborated on a story about a predatory spiritual guru, Maya and I met for dinner. We were both exhausted but satisfied. The story had led to arrests and the rescue of 15 young people who'd been trapped in his compound. "Do you ever think about Whitmore?" she asked over wine. "All the time. You?" "Every day." She swirled her glass. It shaped everything I do now, my career, my worldview, my trust in people. But I'm grateful for it in a weird way. It taught me things I needed to know." "Like what?" "Like how easy it is to be manipulated when you're desperate. Like how institutions can hide monsters. Like how important it is to have someone watching your back who sees clearly, even when you can't." She looked at me meaningfully. "I would have disappeared into that place if not for you. And not just physically disappeared, I would have lost myself completely. They were remaking me into something that wasn't Maya anymore." "You're stronger than you think. You might have figured it out eventually." "Maybe, but probably not soon enough to matter, so thank you, again, for the millionth time." "You've thanked me enough. Ancient history now." "It's not history to me. It's the defining moment of my life. The time I was saved by someone who refused to give up on me even when I'd poisoned her." I smiled. "When you put it that way, I sound almost noble." "You are noble, in a cold, calculating, slightly terrifying way." We both laughed, the tension breaking. "Are you happy?" she asked suddenly. "Really happy? Because sometimes I worry that you're so focused on saving others that you forget to save yourself." The question caught me off guard. Was I happy? I had a career I loved, work that mattered, the satisfaction of making a difference. But I was also alone in ways others couldn't understand, carrying secrets, living with the weight of 2 lifetimes, always vigilant for the next threat. "I'm content," I said finally. "That's enough." "Is it though? Don't you want more? Family, relationship, some kind of normal life?" "Normal is overrated. I tried normal in my first—" I stopped, realizing what I'd almost said. Maya's eyes sharpened. "First what?" "First career path. Before journalism." She didn't believe me. I could see the skepticism in her expression. But she let it go, as she always did with my mysteries. "Just promise me something," she said. "Promise that you're not so busy saving everyone else that you forget to live your own life." "I promise." It was a lie, but a kind one. My life was about saving others now. That was my purpose, my mission. The reason I'd been granted this impossible second chance. Personal happiness was secondary to that goal. But I didn't tell Maya that. She worried enough about me already. The waiter brought our check, and we split it as always. As we left the restaurant, Maya hugged me goodbye. "Love you," she said, "even with all your weird secrets and your martyr complex." "Love you too, even with your annoying insistence on psychoanalyzing me." We parted ways, her to her apartment and her research, me to mine and my next investigation. As I drove home through the city lights, I thought about the girl I'd been in my first life. Naive, unprepared, unable to save the people she loved. I thought about the moment I died on that cold street, wishing desperately for another chance. And I thought about the girl I'd become in this second life. Strategic, ruthless when necessary, unwilling to let predators win, carrying impossible knowledge and using it as a weapon against injustice. I'd never know why I was given this gift, but I knew what to do with it. Somewhere out there, another cult was recruiting, another predator was hunting, another Maya was walking unknowingly into danger, and I would find them. I would watch, gather evidence, plan carefully, and strike at the perfect moment. Because I'd died once trying to save people. I wouldn't fail again. The Whitmore case had taught me that sometimes saving people meant making hard choices. It meant letting them walk into danger while you prepared to pull them out. It meant cold calculation in service of a warm heart. It meant being willing to be the villain in the short term, to be the hero in the long run. I could live with that. I had to live with that because the alternative, letting predators win, letting more Mayas disappear, staying silent when I could speak, was unbearable. I parked outside my apartment and sat for a moment in the darkness, gathering my thoughts. Tomorrow, I'd start researching a new lead, a wellness influencer whose followers seem to be isolating from their families. Early warning signs, subtle red flags. Nothing as large as Whitmore yet, but potentially heading there. I'd watch, I'd wait, and when the moment was right, I'd act. That was my life now, in this second chance I'd been mysteriously granted. Not the normal existence Maya wished for me, but purposeful nonetheless. I climbed out of my car and headed inside, already planning my next move. The story of Whitmore, of Maya's poisoning and rescue, of the Ascension Project's fall, that was behind me now. Ancient history, as I'd told Maya. But its lessons lived on. In every investigation I pursued, every victim I helped, every predator I exposed. I'd been given the rarest of gifts, a chance to undo my greatest failure. And I'd seized it with both hands, making hard choices, sacrificing comfort for effectiveness, letting one friend suffer temporarily so that dozens could be saved permanently. The cost had been high. The morality had been complex. But the outcome had been worth it. Maya was free. The Ascension Project was destroyed, and I had learned to wield my impossible foreknowledge like the weapon it was. In my apartment, I opened my laptop and began researching the wellness influencer. Her name was Serenity Dawn, obviously fake. Her followers called themselves enlightened souls. She preached about transcending toxic relationships and finding your true family within the community. All classic cult language, all familiar patterns. I smiled grimly in the darkness. Here we go again. But this time, I wouldn't wait until someone disappeared. This time, I'd intervene earlier, smarter, better, because I'd already lived through the consequences of being too late. And I'd been given a second life specifically to ensure that never happened again. The cursor blinked on my screen, waiting for my first search query. I cracked my knuckles and began to type. Somewhere, someone was walking into danger, unaware of the trap being laid. But I would see it. I would prepare. And when the time came, I would act. That was my promise to myself, to Maya, to everyone I'd failed in my first life and everyone I'd saved in my second. I would never stop watching, never stop fighting, never stop using this impossible gift to protect the vulnerable from the predators who hunted them. The Ascension Project was gone. Whitmore was destroyed. Maya was saved. But there were always more cults, more predators, more victims who needed someone willing to make hard choices on their behalf. And I would be that someone. For as long as this second life lasted, for as long as I had breath and knowledge and purpose. I would be the girl who died, fighting predators and came back to finish the job. I would be the friend who let you walk into danger, but never let you stay there. I would be the voice that spoke for those who couldn't speak for themselves. That was my redemption. My purpose, my reason for this impossible second chance, and I would not waste it. The investigation into Serenity Dawn began that night and would consume the next 6 months of my life. By the time I was done, 17 people would be freed from her compound, she'd be facing federal charges, and another predatory organization would be exposed and dismantled. But that's another story. This story, Maya's story, Whitmore's story, the Ascension Project's story, this one had a happy ending. The girl who was poisoned by her best friend ended up saving that friend from a fate worse than death. The university that was really a cult was destroyed. The predators who'd hunted vulnerable students for decades were brought to justice. And 2 young women, one who'd betrayed, one who'd been betrayed, found their way back to friendship, stronger and wiser for the journey. It wasn't a perfect ending. Maya still had scars from her indoctrination. I still carried secrets I could never share. Our friendship was complicated by betrayal and manipulation, even when done with good intentions. But we were both alive, free, and fighting on the same side now. In the end, that was all that mattered. I saved Maya, and in doing so, I saved myself. That was the truth of my rebirth, the purpose of my second chance. Not just to take down a cult, though I did that. Not just to rescue my best friend, though I accomplished that too, but to learn that sometimes love means making impossible choices, that sometimes saving people requires letting them suffer temporarily, that sometimes the only way to win is to play a long game that looks like losing until the very end. These were hard lessons, learned across 2 lifetimes. But I learned them, and I used them, and I won. The Ascension Project had taken everything from me in my first life. In my second life, I took everything from them. Fair trade, justice served, story complete. I closed my laptop eventually, the research on Serenity Dawn saved for tomorrow. Tonight, I'd allow myself a moment of satisfaction. I'd done what I set out to do. I'd changed history. I'd saved lives. And I'd proven that second chances, however impossibly granted, were worth fighting for. That was enough. That was everything. I fell asleep that night with a smile on my face, thinking of Maya, safe in her apartment, researching her next paper, living the life she'd nearly lost. My best friend, my redemption, my proof that even the coldest calculations could serve the warmest hearts. I'd let her win the scholarship to Whitmore, but in the end, we both won something far more valuable. Our freedom, our futures, and a friendship forged in fire and tempered by truth. And that made every hard choice, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt completely worth it. The end.